Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how Keir Starmer and Labour have crossed the Rubicon as they begin a very risky campaign to target Rishi Sunak personally. Do Labour know what they're doing, or are they adopting a very high-risk strategy here? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, it's been an interesting few days. I disappear on holiday for the Easter weekend for the first breakaway in 8 years, thinking, well, you don't really get much breaking news at Easter. It should be fine. And then we get a really spicy controversy. I think on one of my videos, I put a message explaining that I was away. And if there was any breaking news, then tell Rishi Sunak I hate him. I should have said Keir Starmer. You know, what I want to do here is explain what Labour have done, why I balk at the decision, but also how it is possible Labour may know what they're doing despite my misgivings. So, for those who don't know, on Thursday afternoon or evening, I'm not entirely sure because I was getting ready to go away, Labour launched a social media campaign poster which targeted Rishi Sunak as not thinking that people who abuse children should go to prison, or at least not all of them. It quoted the number of people who've been convicted of such a crime, yet not received any prison time as a result. Now, the first objection to this is that it is grossly unfair, distorts the facts, and targets an area in which politicians should really tread very lightly. So that last point first. I'll say right from the start, some people object to these ads on the grounds that it's dealing in dirty politics. Not entirely my view, it is dirty politics, but politics is dirty. It would be different if we had a media which did its duty and spoke truth to power, or a population who insisted on finding out the facts before forming judgments, but we don't. People vote for lies. So politicians who try to keep their hands clean will always lose. Voters punish honesty and fairness. The difference between good and bad politics is not keeping your hands clean, but keeping your conscience clean. When politicians talk about sentencing being too soft, I mean, I've got mixed feelings. See, on the one hand, the public have got no idea how sentencing does or should work. Arguing for tougher sentences, it's low-hanging fruit for all politicians, but it is rarely welcomed by barristers. But at the same time, it's a big issue for voters, so you accept it's one of those areas where you have to get your hands dirty. Politicians have to talk about tougher sentences, even though, I mean, it's particularly ridiculous with the Conservatives at the moment. Don't matter what the sentence is if it never comes to court because you've closed down all the courts. But anyway, politicians should still tread warily. See, what Labour have done here is effectively commit themselves to a guaranteed custodial sentence for a particular type of crime. You know, even though there's a sliding scale for it. But this ad is also unfairly targeting Sunak. Even if Labour were of the view that all such criminals should face prison time, and they felt that the Conservatives had been soft on the issue, how are they reasonably blaming Sunak personally? I mean, the motivation for blaming Sunak rather than the Conservatives is because Sunak is more popular than the Conservative Party. Labour have got a handle on the Conservative Party. Labour know that they can persuade voters that a Labour government will be better than the Conservative government. What Rishi Sunak's trying to do is the same trick that Boris Johnson did. Boris Johnson in 2019 tried to claim that his Conservative government would be fundamentally different to the one that came before it. It wasn't. Rishi Sunak's trying the same trick. So they want to target Sunak. Of course they do. But how can they justifiably do it? Like, he was not Prime Minister when most of those convictions quoted in the ad took place. So that's not fair, is it? Finally, a journalist said that they'd approached Labour for comment. I think it was in the Huffington Post I read this. But Labour approached for comment. It was all off the record, of course. And they were told, so they say, that the attitude was that the Tories play dirty like this all the time. Now, that is true, but more of that in a moment. But they also said that when Boris Johnson made long debunked comments about Starmer not prosecuting Savile, which isn't true, that Sunak did nothing to repudiate the claims. Well, I've got three things to say about that sort of reaction, if it's true. First, they're basically admitting that their own ad is on the same level as the Savile smears. They're admitting that their ad is untrue and unfair. How bloody stupid. Second, even if Sunak hadn't himself criticised Johnson's comments, I remember at the time plenty of Tory MPs doing so. In fact, so many of them were chuntering that Johnson was sort of forced to pull back from the comments. He didn't apologise for them, but he did his usual, oh, and then didn't say it again, as I recall, because his own party were like, no, you don't do that. Third, someone actually did find a clip of Sunak criticising Johnson for it. So the comment wasn't even true that Sunak didn't criticise it. Now, to be clear, Sunak, when he was asked about Johnson's Savile comments, said that he wouldn't have said it. Now, you might look at that and think, well, that's not really criticism, is it, Phil? Actually, it was. Sunak was Chancellor at the time, so a senior member of the Conservative front bench. Now, you cannot explicitly criticise the party leader when you are in the top team without resigning. However, when someone like that says, I wouldn't have done that, or I wouldn't have said that, that is actually the political equivalent of stinging criticism. It's political code for Johnson dropped a bollock there in a way that means you don't have to resign. But anyway, those are the moral objections to this latest play from Labour. And for the avoidance of doubt, not only was Starmer himself happy with this strategy, but I see from the news this morning that he's explicitly backing it. So I first supposed that this was the result of a rogue Labour strategist who went a bit far. It didn't get spotted because all the campaigning that was going on at the end of last week. But that's not the case, because if it had been the case, it would have been pulled and an apology issued fairly quickly. In actual fact, the next day they threw out another ad on the same lines. It had clearly been considered at the top level. And given Starmer's statement in the news, I suppose the statement was last night, but reported in the news today, it's quite clear that this has been planned. So the moral arguments aside, are there practical concerns? Because there are things Labour have to do and say in order to win. People can clutch their pearls about how Labour are now stooping to the level of the Tories. A lot of these are the same people who've been moaning about stances that Labour have been taking for the last few years. And do you know what? Those stances have been borne out because look at the polls. But, the Tories set the level is what I would say to this. Not only are they the party of power, but they are the party which controls the media narrative to a large extent. Labour have got no outlets of their own. They've got no direct, connection to the public. Partly due to their maddeningly obtuse attitude to social media. If this works to get rid of the Tories, so be it. They're not sacrificing vulnerable people in these attack ads. They're not saying that, the Tories aren't doing very well stopping the boats. We would fire rockets at their boats. No, it's nothing like that. They're attacking. They're potentially going to give a harder time to people who abuse children. It's not like the worst thing. But I do have practical concerns as well. First of all, as soon as they launched this attack ad, linking Sunak with convicted abusers escaping prison, the right-wing media immediately did their own version. It was exactly the same poster, only this time it had Starmer on it, noting that Starmer sat on the sentencing panel, which makes recommendations to the government. They argue it's just as valid to say Starmer doesn't agree that all these people should go to prison either. It was an obvious retort, and I wonder if Labour even considered that. Because if they were going to cross this line, if they were going to do attack ads of this sort, did they really pick the right area? And there's something else to consider. What Labour are basically doing here is saying that they're going to take the Tories on at their own game and win. Now, I will say at this point, I have seen comments from people saying that Labour have shown themselves to be strategically sound at this point, so we should give them the benefit of the doubt. Now, broadly speaking, okay, that's true. But even an effective organisation, and Labour have been effective over the last few years, can make individual mistakes. It's fair to say that maybe Labour have done their homework on this one, and it's not actually as big a risk as it might seem. But it is also possible that all that's happened here is a very persuasive but otherwise reckless strategy advisor has convinced the Labour leadership that they can win with this, and they turn out to be very wrong. And if they do turn out to be very wrong, there's no escape route from this now. Apart from anything else, they've given the Tories the green light to do more of the same. See, all those Tory MPs who remonstrated with Johnson privately when he sank into the gutter will now think, sod it, if Starmer wants to play dirty, we'll show him. Labour have basically opened Pandora's box, and they'd better be ready. Because although I'm happy to wait and see how this plays out, I do have to ask how they think they're going to win a social media battle of this sort against the Tories. I've long said Labour are shit at social media. Seriously, they don't have a clue. I did a little experiment last week, a little sneaky experiment. See, on Labour's YouTube channel, so they put a few videos out at the moment because it's like local election campaigning, right? But so on their YouTube channel, Labour posted a video of Starmer talking about how Sunak's latest policies were just policies that he suggested 10 years ago. So basically nicking his policies. Now, that was a week ago. Right now, it has just over 1,000 views, 1.2 thousand views this morning. Now, I did my own version the next day, and I did it as an experiment on exactly the same topic, just in my own style. I wouldn't have normally done it because it was not a topic. I knew it wasn't going to get very many views. It's one of those things, you don't get many views. It got 23,000 views. It was the worst performing video I've done in a very long time. I actually tried scanning down. I got bored after a few months. I haven't had a video do that poorly for a long time. As I say, it wasn't a topic I would have chosen to go with. I was just doing it as an experiment. So on the Labour channel, it was one of the more widely viewed of their recent videos. For me, it was the worst performing video for quite a long time. And I got 20 times as many views. How does a former teacher talking to a camera in a shed get 20 times as many views as the leader of the largest political party in this country and the next Prime Minister of the UK? Talking about the same thing to the same audience. Now, the Tories, on the other hand, they may be no better at social media, but they don't need to be. They've got an entire network of very wealthy supporters who do it for them. They own most of our media on a range of platforms. They push conservative arguments onto the public on a daily basis. And they all support each other to an extent. I don't mind Labour jumping into the gutter if that's where the fight is, if that's what they need to do to beat the Tories. Yes, I would prefer Labour to take the high ground. But I'm pragmatic. If the fight is in the gutter, you have to go into the gutter. I won't thank Labour for taking the high ground if it's merely giving them a better vantage point to watch the Tories win another election. I will never thank them for losing this election. What I worry about is that they might have brought a knife to a gunfight. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.